This is a backdoor way of introducing government cryptocurrency. Hi, welcome to our channel where we talk about financial independence and retiring early anywhere on the globe, whether it's at home or abroad, whatever is more convenient for you. I think you'll agree with me that global events are definitely affecting our daily lives at this point in time in the world. So if you'll let me, I'll take you with me on this brief journey into this information that's wanting everyone to accept these ideas like it's the golden egg. And so we're gonna go take a deep dive into this idea of how COVID-19 is ushering in this new great world financial order. It will, one way or another, affect our personal lives as it has right now in the last few months. So let's do it. Let's analyze what's being said about how COVID-19 could change the financial world order. This video is attempting to focus on finances by leaving the communism out of the conversation and giving the appearance that that is the only thing that matters and is important. And it's like saying, you know, all right, look, this fellow over here, we should do business with him, he's rich. But without looking into his reputation and what kind of a person he is. You see what I'm saying? Let's see where it takes us.
America has dominated global finance since the end of the Second World War.
No, actually it was sooner than that, but that's okay. We can ignore that.
When the current system was built.
No, it was built much earlier than that, but that's okay. We can ignore that.
But the economic disaster caused by the coronavirus pandemic could signal a new chapter in financial history.
So this is already, you know, you get this kind of information that is kind of patronizing and it, I don't know if there's a word for patronizing, insulting, and insulting your intelligence, in other words. You know, just all with one big swoop because you know, says who? Says who there's a new financial chapter in history? I mean, sure, we could make this real simple and just say, oh yeah, you shut everything down, nobody's making any money, everybody's going broke. Yeah, it's a new financial chapter in history. Sure, we can keep it simplistic like that, but this is talking about going forward. And I've made other videos talking about how that's going to depend on how people react, and there's been a lot of reactions going on all over the globe, which is really interesting. But let's move forward.
With America's leadership called into question.
That's an opinion, but okay.
Covid-19 has shown that America is failing to sort out its own affairs at home, let alone provide global leadership.
Okay, so right away in the video, we're already bashing America. So, you know, I'm not doing this video because I'm taking sides or because I'm, you know, trying to promote America or bash America. I'm a innocent bystander, you know, third party, whatever you want to call it. But then they put out, you know, misinformation. This is the age of misinformation, the information age. And let me show you why.
$484 billion for loans after the first round of funding ran out.
All right, so it goes on to say how somehow America's dropping the ball and China is just waiting in the wings to step up to the plate and take that leadership role. And it's tying that in with the COVID thing, which is like, okay, wait a minute. Regardless of what anybody, you know, says online, the COVID did start in China. It did start in Wuhan, whether it came from a lab or, you know, a mercado or people eating bats. It doesn't matter. It does matter, but the focus here is that it did come from there. And so one has to question, okay, are you not suspicious to me? I'm super suspicious already that something like a pandemic, which came from a country that is apparently waiting in the wings to take over. So I'm not saying that it's intentionally done. to take over, but to take an opportunistic kind of thought. Okay, so I think it's a little bit of a stretch here, but that's my opinion, but let's hear it.
China hopes to correct this imbalance.
There is a growing call from the international community for reforming the global economic governance system.
Well, who's the international community? I mean, there's different players within the communities and in the international community. Just as in the USA, there are different players that are in power, there are different players in different places. So it just depends on the agenda of the players. So this is already making sweeping, generalized statements about the international community. I mean, it's really saying that there are certain players within that community that are hopeful to change the world order. And in that respect, I would perk up my ears and pay attention, just because that is super important. But, to say that COVID-19 is what's, going to usher this in, it's not completely accurate. All people have to do is return to work and the economy will be just fine. Okay.
Which is a pressing task for us.
It already has the world's second largest economy. Its banks are enormous. The banking sector has been growing fairly steadily for the past.
Well, this goes on to say how great and big the banking sector is, this and that about China. The thing is, China has a lot of population. They have been kind of picking and choosing little bits of capitalism, but they're still a communist country. They still persecute innocent religious believers, that are peaceful. They still have lots of issues with authoritarian control of their citizens. They're still communists. So, in other words, there are two different things going on here. There's the communism, and then there's the finances. And of course, the other thing is that China has a huge population. I mean, it has one of the largest, if not the largest populations in the world. So, as the affluence, even a very small increase in affluence, whereas let's say you have 10 or 20 people all living in the same hut with dirt floors, making $50 a month each. And now all of a sudden they're making, they're working in factories and making, say, $300 to $500 a month each, and perhaps only having a few of them in the same hut, or maybe they're even in houses without dirt floors. I'm just saying that the recent historical emergence of China speaks to the globalization that has been going on, with a lot of the factories moving there and providing a lot of financial increase for billions and billions of people. It's a huge market, so yes, there's going to be increases. But again, there's the other side of the story there. So it goes on to say how big the banks are getting, but how they're internationalizing, and we see this also in some of their apps and their technology, their internet. Huawei telephone company, which grew by leaps and bounds. There's definitely some huge growth going on there in that sector. And it goes on to talk about how they're also pushing their currency out there as, in sort of mimicking the dominance of the US dollar on the world trade, and attempting to do a similar thing with their currency. But you see, a lot of this industrialization and increase that has been going on in China, a lot of it is a direct result, but it in the end, it doesn't matter because it's still happening, it's still there. But you can blame US capitalists for going there and setting up factories because it was cheaper labor, but without giving any regard to the situation on human rights and how China treats its own citizens. And that has been going on for many years, and that apparently they would like that to keep going on. And that's a big pivot point right now in global current events, that the US administration is saying enough's enough, we're not going to keep doing this. So there are changes coming about, but it isn't what this video is saying. All right, so now the video is equating certain do-gooder actions as stepping up to the plate and acting like a global leader. So Right, I mean, the video clearly is okay, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. It clearly screams propaganda to me. It's by The Economist, which I do read occasionally, but I don't have any axes to grind against The Economist. But, I don't know who owns The Economist anyway, or who's paying them. All right, so next it goes on to show the listener or tell the listener what a great job China has done, and then it goes on to say what a terrible job USA has done. What is the evidence that it uses? Again, it uses the do-gooder actions of China of delivering masks and needles and trying to come up with a vaccine, and it just basically it's a condemnation. It isn't really a results obtained analysis. Okay, there's no rational results obtained analysis. It's like, okay, fine, you delivered all these things that people needed, and that's great, but how does that translate into global leadership? I don't want to make this conversation sound like I'm defending one or siding with the other. Clearly, I want to stay focused on the propaganda, the tone of propaganda in this video, and there's so much information like this nowadays in the misinformation age. So now it's kind of mixing it all in a big stew and saying that the do-gooder actions of China government positions it as a global leader, and that investors trust it because of this. So, is that true? The thing about these kinds of conversations is that when you talk about money, there's an unfortunate aspect to money. There's a certain aspect depending on the players when we talk about money, because clearly there is people that use money for good. You've got people that do that, and then you've got people that use money for not good. What those players are. They're in the news, the names. I won't mention the names in this video because it's not about that. You know what the names are and the players are on the global scene that are extremely wealthy and are trying to enslave the global population and push agendas and do all these kinds of things that weren't happening before. The video is trying to tell us that it's safe for money to go to China. All right, so next it goes on to say that China is not just trying to step up to first position in business, but they're also trying to take over with the money, because the US dollar is used around the world and therefore is a reserve currency. So they're trying to take and at least establish themselves as a parallel to that and eventually take over. When we talk about money, and we talk about money in a black and white, granular level discussion on money, and we say that, well, money doesn't discriminate, or money doesn't, the problem with money doesn't discriminate, or money is neutral, there's the word, is that it isn't true. And what happens in these kinds of scenarios where a lot of things where discernment should be used that isn't used, and in other words, superficially looking at a communist country like China and saying, well, look, they got all of these big banks. Look, their bond markets didn't collapse during the COVID crisis. This means that it must be safe for money. And perhaps temporarily it is. Clearly, the video is attempting to persuade people that this is actually a fact and that it's actually a good idea. And so, in the end, how it's going to immerse itself in a top financial position is by controlling how their currency is used in world trade. And it goes on to explain that right now the SWIFT system that we use for transferring money is supposed to be geopolitically neutral, but isn't, is what they're saying. So you think that a communist country will make a system that's neutral? Let me show you something that says otherwise. China declares the US an enemy. And then it says that it's China's turn to slap back now. China is ready to target Apple, Qualcomm, Cisco, and Boeing in retaliation against the US Huawei ban. Okay? Okay, also, China will have investigations or suspensions of businesses that do their right to do business in China. Suspensions and investigations into the right to do business in China will be implemented by China if the US regime proceeds with blocking crucial chips to the Chinese tech giant Huawei. So even though there might be a good reason why those shipments were blocked, they're going to retaliate even harder. And this is a recurring theme with China. If you pay attention to these things, they take when it's their turn to make a move, they take a very hard line. So they're going to do all of these things, and they're even going to perhaps stop all purchases of Boeing aircraft, which also is a distinct possibility. You know, look, they can buy the aircraft from wherever they want, but you know, how is that a geopolitically neutral system? I'm not judging it or saying it should be done or it shouldn't be done. I'm saying it isn't any better than the US system. It sounds worse. You know? So the video goes on to make it sound like this is a needed service or a needed scenario because of all the control that the US have, and perhaps they do. But you know, I remind you that in anything in life, there's the good guys and the bad guys. I mean, sure, can power be abused? Absolutely. But is China immune from abusing their power? Ha ha ha. So I said I'm not taking sides or on one side or the other in this conversation, but clearly I am biased towards good guys and bad guys. And I'm not saying which one's which right now, but I am saying that perhaps having more options in and of itself is not a bad idea. More options in order to transfer money. Instead of only having SWIFT, perhaps there could be a Chinese system also. And that would be great. I'm all for having extra options to do things. That always increases our ability to do things. However, to slant this information in this video to make it sound as if well, the US is bad, therefore China's going to step in as the good guy, as the white knight, save the world from the bad US, and we're going to do these things, and we're going to be the good guy. That's my issue with this video, and all the ones like it. There's a lot of them out there. So the video does admit that China's way further behind and isn't going to overtake the SWIFT transfer system anytime soon. And perhaps you're thinking, well, we're not big, huge, multinational corporations. We don't transfer billions of dollars. We don't care about this that much. Maybe I make a wire transfer once a year or something, you say. However, I want to point out that if and when this system comes about, with China taking a leading role, it just means that these kind of tit-for-tat kind of trade wars will intensify because they will have the power to do so. And that means the global financial system will be even more intertwined, and therefore there would be even more consequences to these kinds of trade wars and the threats that I just read to you and that kind of thing. All right, so then it goes on to say that even though China is likely not to be able to step into the role of having a parallel money transfer system, they are definitely stepping up to the role of, in the technology sector, with money transferring apps. Lots of apps where people load money onto your phone and use that instead of having to have a bank account or Visa or MasterCard and all this kind of thing. I'm not keeping track of what people are actually using globally, but I know that a lot of people do use PayPal. As much as I can't stand PayPal, they're a terrible company. And because of that, I would welcome more options. It would be great if Chinese companies come out with lots of really easy to use apps in order to make payments, and they're not so as bad as PayPal, or they're a lot better. But the thing that isn't being discussed here, it's always going to focus on the good. This is a backdoor way of introducing government cryptocurrency, of getting people to use non-cash transactions, because the electronic transactions are extremely. And the video goes on to say that this is a great idea as you know, this is the tie-in with how COVID-19 could change the financial world order. And of course, it has to slip in that, hey, money's really dirty, like it wasn't dirty before COVID-19, right? Every time I touch money, I always go wash my hands. As far as I know, I've been touching money all my life. And I haven't been sick in 30 years. But that doesn't stop a video like this from saying that, hey, thanks to COVID-19, we don't want to be using cash anymore. China's really stepping up to the plate with these apps, these electronic currencies. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Kind of a cheap shot and, kind of a backdoor shot into ushering in that agenda. But, listen to this.
But China faces a major obstacle. Much of the world distrusts its intentions.
China denying a cover-up.
Top Chinese officials kept it quiet.
After all, Chinese leaders initially denied and covered up the spread of COVID-19.
And there you have it. We had to go through all of that propaganda to get to the bottom line is, hey, China is something to reckon with as far as global business is concerned. And hey, that's great. More power to the businesses. But again, we've got a major foundational issue here.
It's not always transparent about the truth and what happens in its own country. In a global financial system, you need transparency.
Well, there you go. That's the meat and potatoes of the issue. You may or may not know that in a court of law, if a witness's testimony is found, any part of his testimony is found to be not reliable, their whole entire testimony is to be disregarded. And why is that? The character of the witness. That's what we're talking about. That's what they're saying. The character of the player.
How can any country that's doing business with China fully trust them?
They can, plain and simple.
In this case, the character refers to the ideology of the government of China, not the people. So to summarize the video, I'm sure that there's a lot of intention of making COVID-19 a force of change in the financial world. And I think that we've seen what some of those changes that the players with this agenda have. Will it happen? Will it not happen? I think that the answer to that rests within you and I, us, the people, and our acceptance of the facts and our diligence and our hard choices.
Only with resistance can civil liberties be enshrined, Stuart. People are sheep and are willing to accept the trampling of their liberties. It takes a determined minority to resist the government, and that's what we're watching.
In New Jersey, too. Judge Napolitano, thank you very much, sir.
And thanks for watching the video. You know what to do, all the things you're supposed to do. Have a nice day.